I caught my wife and my daughter's fiancé stealing $380,000 from my company. My name is Jim Carter, and what I witnessed wasn't just betrayal. It was the systematic destruction of everything I'd built over 37 years. They thought I was too old and too simple to understand their sophisticated business scheme. While I worked 16-hour days to keep our manufacturing company running, Linda was embezzling funds, and Brett was creating fake vendor companies to launder my money. Their plan? Bankrupt Carter Industrial Solutions, then buy the assets cheap and cut me out completely. But what they didn't know is that I'd been documenting every fake invoice, every suspicious payment, every late-night meeting where they counted my stolen cash. So I did what any smart businessman does. I gathered evidence, called the state fraud investigators, and set a trap they walked right into. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Here's exactly how I caught them red-handed and destroyed their scheme in front of everyone who mattered. Let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand how they saw me. I'm 58 years old. I built Carter Industrial Solutions from nothing in 1987. Started with one used lathe in a rented garage. Worked 16-hour days for the first 5 years. Now we have 28,000 square feet in Akron, Ohio, 42 employees, and we manufacture precision parts for automotive and aerospace companies. Our annual revenue hit $4.2 million last year. But to Linda and Brett, I was just some blue-collar guy who got lucky. The first sign came during our February board meeting. We were discussing new CNC equipment, 12 machines at $180,000 each. I'd researched the specs for months, knew exactly which models would boost our efficiency. Linda rolled her eyes when I started explaining the technical details. "Jim, maybe we should let Brett handle the technology decisions," she said. "He has an MBA from Ohio State. He understands modern business practices." Brett nodded seriously. "Mr. Carter, with respect, these machines are more complex than traditional manufacturing equipment. They require sophisticated software integration." I'd been running CNC machines since before he was born, but I stayed quiet, let them think I didn't understand. The second incident happened 3 weeks later. Brett had prepared what he called a comprehensive modernization proposal for our company. 43 pages, full of buzzwords like synergistic optimization and disruptive innovation paradigms. He presented it during Sunday dinner at our house. Sarah, our 26-year-old daughter, listened politely while Brett explained how Carter Industrial was stuck in outdated operational frameworks. "And the manufacturing sector is evolving rapidly," Brett said, adjusting his Mont Blanc pen. "Companies that don't embrace digital transformation will become obsolete." Linda served the roast beef and smiled at him like he'd just discovered fire. "Brett makes such good points, honey," she told me. "Maybe it's time to let someone with fresh perspective take the lead." Kevin, our 23-year-old son, shifted uncomfortably. He works on our factory floor, knows the business inside out. "Dad's been modernizing constantly," Kevin said. "We just upgraded our inventory management system last year." Brett patted Kevin's shoulder. "That's exactly the kind of incremental thinking that holds companies back. We need revolutionary change, not evolutionary." I cut my roast beef and chewed slowly. Revolutionary change, from a guy who'd never operated a drill press. But the real kicker came during that presentation. Brett had charts showing how our profit margins could increase by 37% if we restructured our operational hierarchy. Translation: if I stepped aside. "Mr. Carter," Brett said, "I've done extensive analysis of companies similar to yours. The most successful ones have transitioned from founder-led to professionally managed structures." Linda nodded enthusiastically. "Brett could help us implement these changes gradually. Nothing dramatic. Nothing dramatic. Just removing me from the company I'd built." After Brett finished his presentation, I asked one simple question. "What's our current overhead percentage?" Brett blinked. "Well, overhead calculations can be complex." 18.4%, I said quietly. "Industry average is 22%. We run lean because I know where every dollar goes." Brett recovered quickly. "Exactly why we need professional management systems. One person can't track everything manually. Linda touched his arm. Brett's absolutely right. You've done amazing work, Jim, but you can't run everything forever. That night, after Brett left, Linda brought me a beer while I sat on our back porch. You know he makes sense, she said. You're not getting any younger. I was 58, not 88. The business is doing fine, I said. Fine isn't enough anymore. Brett has connections, fresh ideas. He could take us to the next level. I sipped my beer and watched the neighbors' kids playing basketball under the streetlight. What's wrong with our current level? Linda sighed. You don't understand what I'm talking about. See, that was the pattern. Anytime I questioned their plans, I didn't understand. Too old, too simple, too stuck in the past. But I understood plenty. I understood that Brett had been visiting our company every week for 2 months, asking detailed questions about our accounting systems, vendor relationships, and cash flow cycles. I understood that Linda had started working late 3 nights a week, even though our bookkeeping had never required overtime before. I understood that our company credit line had increased by $200,000 in March, even though I hadn't authorized it. Most importantly, I understood that confident people don't need to constantly remind others how smart they are. Brett used words like paradigm and synergy because he thought big words made him sound important. Linda deferred to his expertise because she'd convinced herself that MBA meant he was automatically smarter than her husband of 31 years. They saw me as the obstacle between them and easy money. What they didn't see was that I'd been watching, listening, and taking notes for 8 weeks. Because while they were planning my obsolescence, I was documenting their carelessness, and I was about to find out just how careless they'd been. By May, I could see the walls closing in. Our cash flow had problems for the first time in 15 years. On May 20th, I had to delay payroll by 3 days. 42 employees depending on their paychecks, and I couldn't cover them on schedule. That had never happened before. Not once. I called an emergency meeting with Linda to review our accounts. We're hemorrhaging money, I told her, spreading bank statements across the conference room table. Our operating account is down to $23,000. Linda glanced at the statements briefly. It's just a seasonal fluctuation. Brett explained that manufacturing companies always have cash flow cycles. Brett wasn't even there, but somehow he'd already explained our problems. Linda, I've been running this company for 37 years. We don't have seasonal fluctuations. She crossed her arms. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe you're too close to see the bigger picture. The bigger picture. Another one of Brett's phrases. I pulled out our vendor payment ledger. We paid $89,000 to Acme Tool Supply last month. That's triple our normal order. Equipment maintenance costs are rising everywhere. I called Acme yesterday. They say they haven't received payment from us since February. Linda's face went slightly pale, but she recovered quickly. Then there's obviously a banking error. Brett handles most of our vendor relationships now. He'll sort it out. Brett handles our vendor relationships. When had that decision been made? I kept digging through the accounts that night. Found payments to companies I'd never heard of. Midwest Manufacturing LLC, Superior Industrial Services, Advanced Systems Consultants. $23,000 here, $31,000 there, $45,000 to another shell company. Total suspicious payments, $247,000 since February. But if I raised these concerns, Linda would just say I didn't understand modern business practices. Brett would explain that these were strategic partnerships or supply chain optimizations. They'd make me sound like a paranoid old man who couldn't adapt to change. Meanwhile, our best customers were starting to ask questions. Dave Morrison from Precision Automotive called personally. Jim, your last delivery was 3 weeks late. Is everything okay over there? 3 weeks late because we couldn't afford materials. Our suppliers had started demanding payment up front. We're going through some restructuring, Dave. Everything's fine. Good to hear, because we've got other options if Carter Industrial can't meet our schedules. Other options? 20 years of business relationship, and now they had other options. That afternoon, I walked through our factory floor. 12 CNC machines humming smoothly, Overhead cranes moving parts efficiently, workers focused on their tasks. Everything looked normal, but underneath, the foundation was cracking. If this continued for another 60 days, we'd be bankrupt. If we went bankrupt, Brett would probably show up with a buyout offer, probably at 30 cents on the dollar, explaining that he was rescuing the company from poor management. 42 employees would lose their jobs during the transition. Some of these guys had worked for me for 20 years. Tony Castellano, our security chief, had 3 kids in college. Paula Martinez ran our quality control, single mom with twin daughters. They trusted me to keep the company stable. But beyond the immediate financial crisis, something deeper was at stake: my reputation. In our industry, word travels fast. If Carter Industrial went under because of mismanagement, I'd be finished. No one would trust me with a consulting contract or even a part-time advisor role. Linda knew this. Brett knew this. They were counting on my pride to keep me quiet while they systematically destroyed everything I'd built. Because if I fought back and lost, I'd look like a bitter old man who couldn't accept change. If I fought back and won, I'd still have to live with the knowledge that my own wife had betrayed me. Either way, they figured I'd choose dignity over confrontation. They figured wrong. That night, I made 2 phone calls. First, to Paula Reynolds, the forensic accountant who'd helped us during an audit 5 years ago. Second, to Eddie Brennan, my old high school friend who now worked for the State Commerce Commission. Because sometimes quiet dignity means fighting smart instead of fighting loud. The confrontation started Monday morning, June 2nd. I waited until Linda came to the office, then called her into the conference room. The cherry wood table was covered with bank statements, vendor invoices, and payment records. "We need to talk," I said. Linda sat down slowly, scanning the paperwork. "About what?" "About the $23,000 payment to Midwest Manufacturing LLC on March 15th. Her hand paused while reaching for her coffee. "That's a legitimate vendor." "What do they manufacture?" "Industrial supplies." Brett set up the account. I slid a printed page across the table. I looked them up. Midwest Manufacturing LLC was registered on March 1st, 2 weeks before we paid them. Linda glanced at the document without picking it up. "So?" "Their business address is an apartment complex in Columbus. Maybe they work from home." I pulled out another sheet. "The apartment is rented to Brett Patterson." Silence. Linda finally looked directly at me. "There's obviously a reasonable explanation." "What is it?" "You'll have to ask Brett." "I'm asking you. You signed the check." "I signed lots of checks, Jim. I can't remember every vendor." I opened our payment ledger to April. Here's another one. Superior Industrial Services, $31,000 on April 8th. "What about it?" "Also registered to Brett's address." Linda stood up. "Are you accusing me of something?" "I'm asking for an explanation." "The explanation is that Brett is helping us modernize our supplier network. These are strategic partnerships." Strategic partnerships. The buzzwords were flowing now. "Linda, these companies don't exist. They're post office boxes." "That's ridiculous." I pulled out the final document. Advanced Systems Consultants, $45,000 on April 22nd. Registered to Brett's address on April 20th. Linda's face flushed. "You've been investigating our vendors?" "Our vendors? When had they become our vendors?" "I've been investigating why we can't make payroll." "This is harassment, Jim. This is bookkeeping." She grabbed her purse. "I don't have to listen to this." "Yes, you do. You're the company bookkeeper." "I'm also your wife." "Then act like it. Tell me the truth." Linda stopped at the door. "The truth is that you're threatened by change. Brett is trying to help this company, and you can't stand that someone might be better at business than you are." "Better at business? He's stealing from us. Prove it." Those 2 words hung in the air like a challenge. "I will," I said quietly. Linda slammed the door hard enough to rattle the framed safety awards on the wall. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Text message from Brett. "Mr. Carter, Linda told me about your concerns. Happy to discuss whenever convenient. Always here to help." Always here to help. The patronizing tone came through even in text messages. I texted back. "Tomorrow, 2 p.m., conference room." Brett showed up Tuesday afternoon wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than most of our employees made in a week. He carried his leather portfolio and set it carefully on the table. Mr. Carter, I understand there's some confusion about vendor payments. No confusion, just questions. Brett opened his portfolio and pulled out a manila folder. I've prepared detailed documentation on all the suppliers in question. He spread out invoices, purchase orders, and shipping receipts. Everything looked official. Professional letterheads, detailed line items, proper tax calculations. As you can see, Brett said, these are legitimate business expenses. I picked up one of the invoices. This shows delivery of 10 industrial drill bits from Midwest Manufacturing. Correct. We already had 40 drill bits in inventory. Brett smiled patiently. Redundant inventory is good risk management. Where are the drill bits now? I'll have to check with the warehouse team. I walked to the factory floor and returned 5 minutes later with Tony Castellano. Tony, I said, have we received any drill bits from Midwest Manufacturing? Tony shook his head. Never heard of them, boss. Brett maintained his smile. There might be some confusion with the delivery schedule. Tony, I continued, have we received any shipments from Superior Industrial Services? Nope. Advanced Systems Consultants? No, sir. Brett cleared his throat. Mr. Carter, warehouse records can be incomplete. I have shipping confirmations from all these vendors. Show me. He rifled through his portfolio, but came up empty. I must have left them in my car. I'll wait. Brett checked his watch. Actually, I have another appointment. Can we continue this tomorrow? No, we can finish it now. The calm mask finally slipped. Mr. Carter, I don't appreciate being interrogated like some criminal. Then stop acting like one. Brett stood up. I think we're done here. We're done when I say we're done. Actually, we're done when I say we're done. Linda and I have been discussing this company's future, and frankly, your management style is becoming a liability. There it was, the real Brett Patterson. My management style. Yes, micromanaging, paranoid, resistant to innovation. Classic founder's syndrome. I nodded slowly. Founder's syndrome. It's very common. Successful entrepreneurs who can't delegate authority. Is that your professional diagnosis? Brett picked up his portfolio. It's my professional recommendation that you consider stepping back from day-to-day operations. And who would handle those operations? Someone with appropriate credentials and experience. Someone like you. If that's what's best for the company. I looked at Tony, who was still standing in the doorway. Tony, would you escort Mr. Patterson to his car? Brett's face went red. You can't throw me out. Yes, I can. It's my company. Not for much longer, Brett said. Then he walked out. But what he didn't realize was that Tony Castellano had been recording our conversation on his phone. That evening I sat in my home office reviewing everything I knew. Brett was clearly running a shell company scam. The question was how deep it went and who else was involved. Linda was either a willing accomplice or a useful idiot. Given her defensive reactions during our conference room meeting, I suspected the former, but I needed concrete proof before making any accusations. I opened my laptop and started researching. Eddie Brennan and I had stayed in touch since high school. He'd mentioned his job with the State Commerce Commission during our Christmas card exchanges, but I'd never paid much attention. Now I Googled Ohio State Commerce Commission and found Eddie's official title, Senior Investigator, Corporate Fraud Division. Perfect timing. I called his office. Eddie Brennan speaking. Eddie, it's Jim Carter from Akron. We went to high school together. Jim, good to hear from you. How's the manufacturing business? Complicated. I need some advice about shell company fraud. Eddie's tone shifted immediately. Official advice or friendly advice? Start with friendly, see where it goes. I explained the situation without naming names. Suspicious payments, fake vendors, registration addresses that didn't match business locations. How much money are we talking about? Eddie asked. $250,000, maybe more. That's felony territory. You'll need documentation. I have bank records. That's a start. But you'll need evidence of intent to defraud. Wire transfers, email communications, recorded conversations. Hypothetically, if someone were recording conversations without consent, Ohio is a one-party consent state. If you're part of the conversation, you can record it legally. I made notes while we talked. What about asset recovery? Depends on timing. If you catch it early, most funds can be recovered. If the money's already been laundered offshore, it gets complicated. How long does an investigation typically take? For something this clear-cut, 6 to 8 weeks if you have solid evidence. After hanging up, I walked to my bedroom window and looked across our backyard. Linda was in the kitchen, probably preparing dinner like she had for 31 years. How had we gotten here? I thought about our early years, when Carter Industrial was just a dream and a used lathe. Linda had believed in me then, had worked part-time jobs to help with the business loan payments. When had that changed? When had she started seeing me as an obstacle instead of a partner? Maybe it was gradual. Maybe Brett had slowly convinced her that I was holding her back from a better life. Or maybe she'd been resentful for years and Brett just gave her permission to act on those feelings. Either way, I couldn't let sentiment cloud my judgment. I pulled out my phone and called Paula Reynolds. Paula, it's Jim Carter. I need a forensic accounting review. What's the situation? Suspected embezzlement, multiple shell companies, fake invoices, probably $300,000 or more. When do you need results? Yesterday. Paula laughed. I can start tomorrow. Standard rate is $200 per hour. Bill me directly. And Paula, keep this completely confidential until we know what we're dealing with. Understood. My third call was to Kevin. He answered on the first ring. Dad, what's up? Are you home tonight? Yeah, why? Come over. We need to talk. Kevin arrived an hour later. I walked him through everything I'd discovered, showing him the bank records and fake vendor invoices. Holy shit, he whispered. Mom's stealing from the company? Language. And yes, that's what it looks like. What are you going to do? Build a case, gather evidence, make sure we have enough proof that they can't talk their way out of it. Kevin stared at the paperwork. This is going to destroy our family. Our family was destroyed the moment they decided to steal from us. But Mom, your mother made her choice, Kevin. Now I'm making mine. We talked for another hour. Kevin agreed to keep watching for anything suspicious at work, but I told him not to confront anyone or change his normal routine. Let them think I'm just a paranoid old man who doesn't understand modern business, I said. Are you sure you want to go through with this? I looked at the evidence spread across my desk. Bank statements, wire transfers, fake invoices, all adding up to the systematic theft of everything I'd worked to build. Son, sometimes the only way to save something is to be willing to lose it. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for them to walk into it. The public humiliation happened July 10th, during our quarterly board meeting. We held these meetings 4 times a year in our main conference room. Nothing fancy, just me, Linda, our lawyer Greg Hansen, and our accountant Maria Santos, reviewing company performance and planning ahead. But this time, Linda had invited special guests. I hope you don't mind, she said as we gathered around the cherrywood table. Brett prepared a presentation about our modernization strategy. I thought Greg and Maria should hear it. Brett walked in wearing another expensive suit, carrying a leather briefcase and laptop computer. Behind him came Sarah, our daughter, looking uncomfortable. Thanks for including me, Dad, Sarah said quietly. I hadn't invited Sarah, but Linda apparently felt our daughter needed to witness whatever was about to happen. Mr. Carter, Brett said, setting up his PowerPoint presentation, I've been analyzing Carter Industrial's operational structure for several months. What I've found is both concerning and correctable. Greg Hansen raised an eyebrow. Concerning how? Brett clicked to his first slide. Carter Industrial, Challenges and Solutions. The primary issue, Brett continued, is outdated management philosophy. Mr. Carter has done remarkable work building this company, but founder-led organizations often struggle with scalability. Maria Santos took notes while Brett clicked through slides showing industry statistics, growth projections, and competitive analysis. Our recommendation, Brett said, is gradual leadership transition combined with strategic restructuring. Greg looked confused. Who is our? Linda and I have been developing comprehensive modernization plans. The goal is preserving Carter Industrial's legacy while positioning it for 21st century success. I sat quietly, letting Brett dig his hole deeper. His presentation was impressive. 37 slides of charts, graphs, and business jargon. He'd obviously spent weeks preparing it. The financial projections are conservative, Brett explained, but we're confident that new management protocols can increase profit margins by 43% within 18 months. Linda nodded enthusiastically. Brett's analysis shows exactly why we've been struggling with cash flow lately. Struggling with cash flow, like it was a natural phenomenon instead of systematic theft. Brett clicked to a slide titled Recommended Organizational Structure. At the top was Chief Executive Officer Brett Patterson. Greg Hansen set down his pen. Are you proposing a hostile takeover? Not hostile, Brett said smoothly. Strategic succession planning. Mr. Carter would remain as Chairman Emeritus with full benefits and equity participation. Chairman Emeritus, a fancy title for retired against his will. Of course, Brett continued, any transition would require board approval and careful financial planning. He clicked to his next slide. Immediate liquidity solutions. But to facilitate this transition, I've arranged bridge financing through several strategic partners. These partnerships would provide working capital while we implement operational improvements. Maria Santos looked skeptical. What kind of partnerships? Brett smiled confidently. Supply chain optimization agreements with Midwest Manufacturing, Superior Industrial Services, and Advanced Systems Consultants. These companies specialize in manufacturing efficiency. I finally spoke. How much working capital? The initial phase would provide $400,000 in immediate liquidity. In exchange for what? Preferred vendor status and long-term contracts. Greg Hansen leaned forward. Are these the same companies Carter Industrial has been paying large sums to recently? Brett didn't miss a beat. Exactly. These partnerships have already begun. The next phase would formalize the relationships while providing additional capital injection. I looked around the table. Greg and Maria were clearly confused. Sarah looked uncomfortable. Linda watched Brett with obvious pride. Brett, I said quietly, could you explain how these preferred vendor agreements work? Certainly. Midwest Manufacturing, for example, would provide specialized equipment and materials at below-market rates. In exchange, they receive guaranteed order volumes and payment priority. What kind of specialized equipment? Industrial tooling, precision components, maintenance supplies? Have we received any equipment from Midwest Manufacturing? Brett hesitated for the first time. The delivery schedule has been flexible. Flexible how? Market conditions have required some adjustments to the original timeline. I opened my briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. Bank statements, wire transfers, corporate registration records. Brett? These are payment records showing $247,000 transferred to your 3 strategic partners since February. Greg Hansen straightened in his chair. These are also corporate registration documents, I continued, showing that all 3 companies are registered to your apartment address in Columbus. The room went completely silent. Brett's confident smile flickered. Mr. Carter, I think you're misunderstanding the corporate structure. Am I misunderstanding the fact that Midwest Manufacturing was registered 2 weeks before we paid them $23,000? Maria Santos reached for the documents. Brett tried to interrupt. These partnerships are complex. The registration addresses are for administrative convenience. Brett, Greg Hansen said firmly, are you telling us that Carter Industrial has paid nearly $250,000 to companies that you own? It's not that simple, Linda finally spoke up. Jim, you're embarrassing yourself. Brett has been trying to help this company, and you're acting like some paranoid conspiracy theorist. But Linda, Greg said, if these payments went to companies that Brett controls, that's a serious legal issue. It's not illegal to have business relationships, Linda snapped. It is if those relationships weren't disclosed, Maria said, studying the bank statements. And it's definitely illegal if the services weren't actually provided. Brett stood up abruptly. I think there's been a misunderstanding. These are legitimate business expenses. Then show us the equipment, I said. Excuse me? Show us the $23,000 worth of industrial drill bits from Midwest Manufacturing. Show us the $31,000 in precision components from Superior Industrial Services. Show us anything we've actually received for our $247,000. Brett grabbed his briefcase. I don't have to justify legitimate business expenses to someone who doesn't understand modern supply chain management. You do if you want to avoid criminal charges. The room erupted. Linda shot to her feet. Criminal charges? Jim, have you lost your mind? Sarah looked shocked. Dad, what's happening? Greg Hansen was reading the wire transfer records. Jim, if these payments were made without board approval for non-existent services, we're looking at embezzlement charges. Brett headed for the door. I've heard enough. Mr. Carter, your paranoid accusations are exactly why this company needs new leadership. Sit down, Brett. I don't think so. Sit down, or I call the police right now. Brett stopped with his hand on the door handle. Your choice, I said. We can finish this conversation here, or we can finish it downtown with detectives present. Linda was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. You wouldn't. Try me. Brett slowly returned to his seat. His confident mask had finally cracked completely. Now, I said, opening my briefcase wider, let me show you what a real investigation looks like. I pulled out my phone and called Eddie Brennan. Eddie? It's Jim. Are you available for that meeting we discussed? Be there in 20 minutes. Greg Hansen looked confused. What meeting? The one with the Ohio State Commerce Commission, I said. Eddie Brennan is their senior investigator for corporate fraud. Linda's face went white. While we waited, I laid out the rest of my evidence. Paula Reynolds had worked quickly over the past week, and her forensic analysis was devastating. Maria, I said, handing her a thick folder, Paula Reynolds prepared a complete audit of our questionable payments. The total is actually $380,000, not $247,000. Maria flipped through pages of bank records, wire transfers, and financial analysis. Jesus Christ, she whispered. This goes back to January. The pattern is consistent, I explained. Fake invoices from shell companies all registered to Brett's address. The invoices looked professional, but the services were never provided. Brett tried one last time. Those companies are legitimate. The services were provided. Really? I pulled out another document. Here's a signed statement from Tony Castellano, our warehouse supervisor. He confirms that we've never received deliveries from Midwest Manufacturing, Superior Industrial Services, or Advanced Systems Consultants. Sarah finally spoke up. Brett, is this true? Sarah, your father is trying to destroy our relationship because he can't accept that I might improve his company. By stealing $380,000? I didn't steal anything. Greg Hansen was studying the forensic report. Brett, these wire transfers show money going from Carter Industrial to companies you control, then immediately transferred to personal accounts. How do you explain that? It's complicated. Uncomplicate. Eddie Brennan arrived exactly 20 minutes later, mid-50s, gray hair, wearing a rumpled sport coat that made him look like a detective from a TV show. Sorry I'm late, Eddie said, setting down a briefcase. Traffic on I-77 was brutal. He shook hands around the room while I made introductions. Mr. Brennan, Greg Hansen said, we seem to have a situation involving embezzled funds and fraudulent vendor payments. Eddie nodded. Jim filled me in on the basics. Mind if I review your evidence? For the next 30 minutes, Eddie examined bank statements, wire transfer records, and Paula Reynolds' forensic analysis. Brett sat silently, occasionally glancing at Linda for support. Linda stared at the table. Finally, Eddie looked up. This is pretty straightforward. Mr. Patterson, you created shell companies and submitted fraudulent invoices to Carter Industrial. The invoices claimed payment for goods and services that were never delivered. That's not... Let me finish. The money was then transferred to personal accounts under your control. In Ohio, this constitutes theft by deception and money laundering. Sarah covered her mouth with her hands. The total amount stolen was $380,000, Eddie continued. That puts this in the felony range with a potential sentence of 5 to 10 years. Brett finally found his voice. I was trying to help the company. Mr. Carter doesn't understand modern business practices. What I understand, Eddie said, is that you stole $380,000 and thought you could get away with it. Linda suddenly spoke up. I didn't know. I thought the invoices were legitimate. Eddie turned to her. Mrs. Carter, you signed the checks. Brett told me they were vendor payments. Did you verify the vendors? I trusted him. Eddie made notes while he talked. Mrs. Carter, as the company bookkeeper, you had a fiduciary responsibility to verify expenses before authorizing payments. She's a victim too, Brett said desperately. I convinced her that these were legitimate business expenses. Mr. Patterson, do you want to make a formal statement? I want a lawyer. That's your right, but I should mention that cooperation typically results in more favorable sentencing recommendations. Eddie pulled out his phone. I'm calling this in to our criminal investigation unit. Jim, I'll need you to come downtown tomorrow to file a formal complaint. What happens next? Sarah asked. We'll execute search warrants for Mr. Patterson's residence and bank accounts. If the evidence supports what I've seen today, we'll file criminal charges within 72 hours. Brett stood up again. This is insane. I was trying to modernize a failing company. By stealing from it? Eddie asked, but creating strategic partnerships that would benefit everyone. Strategic partnerships don't involve fake invoices and shell companies. Greg Hansen cleared his throat. Mr. Brennan, what about asset recovery? Good question. Most of the stolen funds are still in accounts we can trace. Mr. Patterson hasn't had time to move everything offshore. Linda looked at Brett with something approaching horror. Offshore? You were going to move the money offshore? Brett didn't answer. Eddie continued. We'll freeze all related accounts pending investigation. Carter Industrial should recover most of the stolen funds within 60 days. I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. There's one more thing, Eddie said. Mr. Patterson, I assume you know that defrauding a manufacturing company that holds government contracts carries federal penalties as well. Brett's last bit of color drained from his face. We supply parts to aerospace contractors, I explained to Eddie. About 30% of our revenue comes from defense-related work. That makes this a federal case. You'll be hearing from the FBI within a week. Sarah was crying now. Brett, how could you do this? Sarah, I love you. This is all a misunderstanding. You stole money from my father, and I was trying to secure our future. By destroying my family? Eddie packed up his briefcase. Mr. Patterson, I strongly recommend you contact an attorney immediately. The charges I'm filing tomorrow are serious. Brett looked around the room one last time. His confident businessman mask was completely gone, replaced by something that looked like panic. Mr. Carter, he said, we can work this out. I'll pay everything back. Too late for that, I said quietly. Please, Sarah and I are getting married next month. Sarah took off her engagement ring and placed it on the conference table. No, we're not. Brett stared at the ring for a long moment, then walked out without another word. Linda finally looked at me. Jim, I'm sorry. Are you? I didn't know he was stealing. You thought, what, Linda? I thought he could make us rich. We were already rich. We had a successful company, a good marriage, and a family that respected each other. Linda started crying. I know I messed up everything. Eddie gathered his papers. Mrs. Carter, you'll need to come downtown tomorrow as well. We'll need a complete statement about your involvement. Am I going to be arrested? That depends on what the evidence shows about your knowledge and intent. After Eddie left, the conference room felt like a battlefield. Greg Hansen and Maria Santos quietly packed their briefcases, while Sarah sat staring at her engagement ring. Dad, Sarah said finally, I'm sorry I didn't see what Brett was really like. You're not the first person to be fooled by a con man, but I should have trusted you. You did nothing wrong, honey. Linda wiped her eyes. What happens now? I looked at my wife of 31 years, the woman who'd helped me build Carter Industrial from nothing, the woman who just helped someone try to destroy it. Now we see if our marriage can survive your betrayal. Jim, I need time to think, Linda. A lot of time. The status had definitely been reversed. Brett went from would-be CEO to criminal defendant. Linda went from co-conspirator to potential felon, and I went from threatened victim to vindicated survivor. But the hardest part was still coming. The next 48 hours moved fast. Wednesday morning, I drove to the Ohio State Commerce Commission offices in Columbus to file my formal complaint. Eddie Brennan walked me through 2 hours of detailed statements, documenting every fraudulent payment and forged invoice. This is one of the cleaner cases I've seen, Eddie told me. Most embezzlement involves complex accounting tricks. This is just straight theft with fake paperwork. Will it stick in court? Jim, with this evidence, any prosecutor could win this case in their sleep. That afternoon, Linda came home with a criminal defense attorney named Richard Walsh. Mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of lawyer who specialized in white-collar crime. Mr. Carter, Walsh said, extending his hand, I represent your wife. I'm hoping we can reach some understanding that avoids criminal prosecution. We sat in our living room, the same room where Brett had presented his modernization proposal 3 months earlier. What kind of understanding? I asked. Linda is prepared to make full restitution for any funds that may have been misdirected. Misdirected? $380,000 was stolen, Mr. Walsh. There's nothing indirect about it. Walsh consulted his notes. My client maintains that she believed all payments were for legitimate business expenses. Your client signed checks to companies that didn't exist. She relied on information provided by Mr. Patterson. I looked at Linda, who was sitting on our couch like a stranger. Is that your defense? You were too stupid to notice we were being robbed? Linda flinched. Jim, please, because that's basically what your lawyer is saying, that you're not smart enough to do your job. Walsh interrupted. Mr. Carter, there's no need for hostility. We're trying to find a resolution that works for everyone. Everyone? What about the 42 employees who almost missed paychecks because of your client's theft? Alleged theft. Documented theft. With bank records, wire transfers, and recorded conversations. Walsh looked surprised. Recorded conversations? Tony Castellano recorded Brett's confession during our June confrontation. Ohio is a one-party consent state. I pulled out my phone and played the audio file. Brett's voice, clear and arrogant. Your management style is becoming a liability. Someone with appropriate credentials should handle day-to-day operations, if that's what's best for the company. Then my voice. Someone like you? Brett. If that's what's best for the company. Walsh looked uncomfortable. That's not exactly a confession of theft. Keep listening. Brett's voice continued. Not for much longer, when I told him it was my company. That sounds like a threat to steal the business, I said. Combined with the documented embezzlement, it shows clear intent. Linda was crying again. Jim, I never wanted to hurt you. But you did hurt me. You hurt our employees. You hurt our family. Walsh tried a different approach. What would it take for you to consider dropping the charges? I'm not dropping anything. This case is with the State Commerce Commission and the FBI now. It's out of my hands. Surely you have some influence. Mr. Walsh, your client helped steal $380,000 from my company. She violated 31 years of marriage vows. She betrayed the trust of every employee who depends on Carter Industrial for their livelihood. I stood up and walked to our wedding photos on the mantelpiece. The only influence I have is over whether I file for divorce immediately or wait until after the criminal trial. Linda sobbed. Jim, don't do this. We can fix our marriage. Can we? Because I'm having trouble figuring out when you stopped being my wife and started being Brett's accomplice. It wasn't like that. What was it like, Linda? Explain it to me. She wiped her eyes. Brett made me feel important, like I was more than just a bookkeeper for a small-town factory. You were the bookkeeper for a $4.2 million manufacturing company. You were my partner in building something significant. He said we could do better, that you were holding us back. So you decided to steal from me. I thought we were modernizing. By funneling money to fake companies? Linda looked at her lawyer helplessly. Walsh consulted his notes again. Mr. Carter, my client is willing to testify against Mr. Patterson in exchange for reduced charges. She's going to testify anyway. The prosecutor will subpoena her. Cooperative testimony could result in probation instead of prison time. That's between your client and the prosecutor. Thursday morning brought more developments. Eddie Brennan called with updates. We executed search warrants on Patterson's apartment and bank accounts, found $340,000 in various accounts, plus evidence of plans to transfer additional funds to offshore banks. Plans? Email communications with a banker in the Cayman Islands. Patterson was setting up accounts to move the money next week. Jesus. It gets better. We found detailed spreadsheets showing his projected timeline for bankrupting Carter Industrial. He planned to buy the company assets for about 30% of their actual value. I sat down heavily. He was going to destroy my company to buy it cheap. Exactly. The spreadsheets show he expected to complete the takeover by September. What about Linda? Eddie paused. The evidence shows she knew more than she's admitting. We found text messages between her and Patterson discussing exit strategies and retirement timelines. Meaning they planned this together. Your wife wasn't a victim, Jim. She was a co-conspirator. That afternoon, FBI agent Karen Mitchell visited our factory, professional, thorough, and completely unimpressed by Brett's claims of misunderstanding. Mr. Carter, because your company holds contracts with defense contractors, this becomes a federal case. We take fraud against defense suppliers very seriously. What does that mean for Brett? Federal charges carry longer sentences than state charges. If convicted on all counts, Mr. Patterson could face 15 to 20 years. And Linda? That depends on her level of cooperation and the evidence of her intent. Agent Mitchell interviewed several employees, reviewed our security footage, and collected boxes of financial records. This is actually a textbook case, she told me. Mr. Patterson created a classic shell company scheme with clear intent to defraud. The evidence is overwhelming. Friday brought the arrest warrants. I was in my office when Eddie Brennan called. Patterson was arrested this morning. The charges are theft by deception, money laundering, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit business fraud. What about Linda? She's being arrested this afternoon. Same charges, but the prosecutor may offer a plea deal if she cooperates fully. I hung up and sat quietly for several minutes. 37 years of building Carter Industrial, 31 years of marriage, and it all came down to this. My phone rang, Sarah's number. Dad, I just heard about the arrests. Word travels fast. Are you okay? I'm relieved that justice is being served. I'm sad about everything else. What about Mom? Your mother made her choices, honey. Now she has to live with the consequences. Oh, do you think you'll divorce her? I looked out my office window at the factory floor. 42 people working productively. The company running smoothly again now that we'd stopped hemorrhaging money to Brett's fake vendors. Sarah, I built this company to last. I thought I'd built a marriage to last too, but marriages require trust, and I don't know if that can be rebuilt. I understand, Dad. Your mother and I will figure out our relationship after the legal issues are resolved. Right now, I need to focus on protecting the company and our employees. Saturday morning, Linda called from jail. Jim, can you bail me out? No. Please, I can't stay in here. You should have thought about that before you decided to steal from our company. I'm your wife. You were my wife. I'm not sure what you are now. Jim, Linda, you chose Brett over me. You chose his get-rich-quick scheme over the company we built together. You chose betrayal over loyalty. She was crying. I can change. We can fix this. Maybe we can, but first you need to accept responsibility for what you did. Stop claiming you're a victim. Stop blaming Brett for your choices. What do you want me to do? I want you to tell the truth, all of it. And then I want you to think about whether the woman who stole $380,000 from her husband's company is someone worth saving. I hung up. The quiet power approach had worked perfectly. Instead of exploding in anger, I'd gathered evidence methodically. Instead of confronting them privately, I'd expose them publicly. Instead of making threats, I'd let the legal system handle justice. Brett went from arrogant MBA to federal defendant. Linda went from respected partner to criminal accomplice. And Carter Industrial went from near bankruptcy to financial stability. The status reversal was complete. The ripple effects started immediately and spread throughout our industry. Brett's consulting firm, Patterson Strategic Solutions, lost its business license within a week of his arrest. The Ohio Department of Commerce published a public notice warning businesses about fraudulent consulting schemes. His former clients started calling each other. Word spread through manufacturing networks that Brett Patterson was a con artist who targeted family-owned businesses. The Akron Beacon Journal ran a front-page story. Local businessman arrested in $380K embezzlement scheme. The article included details about the fake vendor fraud and Brett's plan to acquire Carter Industrial through bankruptcy manipulation. Within days, our competitors' customers were calling us directly. "Jim," said Dave Morrison from Precision Automotive, "we heard about your situation with that consultant. Are you guys stable now?" "More stable than ever, Dave." "Good. We've got 3 major contracts coming up. Interested in bidding?" The same pattern repeated with other customers. Instead of damaging our reputation, the fraud investigation actually enhanced it. People respected how we'd handled the crisis. Our employees rallied around the company. Tony Castellano started a voluntary overtime schedule to help us catch up on delayed orders. Paula Martinez implemented new quality control procedures that impressed our aerospace customers. "Mr. Carter," said Jennifer Walsh, one of our machine operators, "we never doubted you'd figure out what was wrong." The financial recovery happened faster than expected. The FBI's asset forfeiture team recovered $340,000 from Brett's accounts within 3 weeks. Additional funds were recovered from a secret account Linda had opened without my knowledge. Total recovery, $367,000 out of $380,000 stolen. Maria Santos, our accountant, was amazed. Most embezzlement cases recover maybe 30% of stolen funds. You got back 97%. "That's what happens when you catch thieves early," Eddie Brennan explained. "They hadn't had time to spend or hide most of the money." The company's financial health improved dramatically once we stopped bleeding money to fake vendors. Our cash flow problems disappeared. We made payroll on time, paid vendors promptly, and even had surplus funds for equipment upgrades. But the personal consequences were more complex. Sarah broke off all contact with Brett. She moved back home temporarily while processing the betrayal. "Dad," she told me, "I keep thinking about things Brett said and did. How did I miss the signs?" Con artists are skilled manipulators, honey. They tell people what they want to hear. "But I should have known something was wrong when he started criticizing you all the time." "You trusted someone you loved. That's not a character flaw." Kevin struggled with anger toward his mother. "How could she do this to us?" he asked during one of our evening talks. "People make bad decisions when they feel unappreciated or unfulfilled. That doesn't excuse theft." "No, it doesn't. But understanding motivation helps prevent future problems." Linda's criminal case moved quickly. Her attorney negotiated a plea agreement in exchange for full cooperation against Brett. She received 3 years probation, 500 hours community service, and full restitution for her portion of the theft. The judge was lenient because she was a first-time offender who showed genuine remorse. Brett's case was more serious. Federal prosecutors charged him with wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. His defense attorney tried to claim he genuinely intended to help Carter Industrial, but the evidence was overwhelming. The recorded conversation with Tony Castellano was particularly damaging. Brett's arrogant threats combined with the documented theft showed clear criminal intent. He pleaded guilty to all charges and received 8 years in federal prison, plus $50,000 in fines. The local business community took notice. The Akron Manufacturing Association invited me to speak at their quarterly meeting about detecting vendor fraud. "The key," I told them, "is verifying everything. Don't let anyone make you feel stupid for asking questions." Several other business owners approached me afterward with suspicions about their own questionable vendor relationships. "Jim," said Pete Rodriguez, who owned a metal fabrication company, "we've been paying a consultant $15,000 a month for efficiency analysis, but I've never seen any actual analysis." I introduced Pete to Paula Reynolds for a forensic review. Sure enough, his consultant was running a similar scam. The fraud investigation made Carter Industrial locally famous. Articles in trade magazines featured our story as a case study in detecting embezzlement. We received inquiries from companies across Ohio wanting to partner with us. Our reputation for integrity became a competitive advantage. Most importantly, our employees felt secure again. The uncertainty and anxiety that had plagued the company during Brett and Linda's embezzlement disappeared. "Mr. Carter," said Tony Castellano, "this place feels like home again." Home. That's exactly what I'd been fighting to preserve. The manufacturing floor hummed with productive energy. Orders were flowing in. Employees were confident in their job security. Carter Industrial had survived the worst crisis in its 37-year history. But the most difficult consequence was still unresolved: my marriage to Linda. She was living in a rented apartment downtown, attending counseling sessions, and working part-time at a nonprofit to fulfill her community service requirement. We'd spoken twice since her arrest. Brief, formal conversations about legal matters and financial arrangements. The question remained, could we rebuild trust after such a profound betrayal? I wasn't sure I wanted to try. 6 months later, Carter Industrial was thriving. We'd signed 2 major contracts worth $1.8 million total. Our employee count grew to 47. The new CNC machines I'd wanted to buy were ordered and installed. Most importantly, we'd implemented new financial controls to prevent future fraud. Every vendor payment required 2 signatures. All new suppliers had to provide physical addresses and references. Maria Santos conducted monthly audits of suspicious expenses. "Trust but verify" became our unofficial motto. Linda and I started marriage counseling in December. Dr. Patricia Hamilton, a therapist who specialized in betrayal recovery, helped us navigate the complex emotions around rebuilding trust. "Linda," Dr. Hamilton said during our 3rd session, "what do you want Jim to understand about your motivations?" "I felt invisible," Linda answered, "like I was just the bookkeeper wife who didn't matter anymore." "And how do you feel about that now?" "Embarrassed, ashamed. I destroyed something good because I wanted something I thought was better." Dr. Hamilton turned to me. "Jim, what would you need from Linda to consider rebuilding trust?" I thought carefully. Complete honesty about everything that happened. No more secrets, no more lies. An acceptance that our relationship has permanently changed. Changed how? She forfeited the right to question my business decisions. She forfeited the right to access company accounts. She forfeited the automatic trust that 31 years of marriage had built. Linda nodded sadly. "I understand. The process is ongoing. Some days I think we can rebuild something worthwhile. Other days I remember the security footage of her counting stolen money and wonder if I'm wasting my time. But here's what I learned. Quiet dignity beats explosive anger every time. Methodical evidence beats emotional accusations. Legal consequences beat personal revenge. When someone betrays your trust, don't get mad immediately. Get smart. Document everything. Build an unshakable case. Then let justice run its course. Respect isn't automatic, even in families. It's earned through consistent character and lost through deliberate betrayal. Most importantly, never mistake someone's education credentials for their moral character. An MBA doesn't make you honest. A business plan doesn't make you trustworthy. Integrity isn't taught in business school. It's learned through years of choosing to do the right thing when no one's watching. Carter Industrial is stronger now because we face this crisis with principles instead of panic. If you've enjoyed this story, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. And let me know in the comments. How do you protect yourself from people who mistake your kindness for weakness? Thanks for listening. Until next time.